Thank you so much for coming down today. Thank you for your very polite attention. We are so honored today to have Congressman Joe Kennedy visit Mansfield High School. A round of applause, please. Congressman Kennedy represents the 4th Massachusetts Congressional District, and your colleague, Paige Oliveira, just happens to intern in his office. So Paige had the forethought enough to see if he might be interested in visiting MHS. Congressman Kennedy said yes, and so many thanks to you, Paige, for getting this off the ground. And further, I want to thank Mr. Hawking's Social Studies Department Chair for assisting with all of the logistics today as well. And so, thank you, Bill. Paige, I'd like to invite you up to the mic to give Congressman Kennedy a proper introduction and also to review the format of today's events. Paige?
Good afternoon, and thank you all for coming. My name is Paige Oliveira. So this year, Junior Allie Chase and I decided to found the MHS Democrats in order to create a forum for political discussion and a platform to raise awareness for important issues. The level of engagement in political discourse I have seen from my peers, especially from events like the Walkout, has inspired me. To keep encouraging this involvement, we invited someone who has made it his mission to fight for his constituents and involve youth through programs like the Congressional Art Competition and the Youth Cabinet. He will tell us a bit about himself, and then we have some students who have questions for him. Please join me in welcoming our representative, Congressman Joe Kennedy.
Paige, thanks. How about that? Better? All right. Paige, thanks. Thanks for interning. Thanks for organizing this. Thanks for the invitation. Really, really grateful. And really an honor for me to be here with all of you. Principal Watkins, thank you for having me. And for all of you guys, I guess I kind of got you out of class, but you got to come to an assembly instead, so maybe that's better, maybe not. Hey. We're off to a good start. So I figured I'd talk to you for a couple of minutes, but I would much rather turn this over to a conversation. I think probably most of you get talked at a fair amount, particularly if any of you ever been to a political event or you see people giving speeches. I always find it much more interesting to hear from you than to listen to myself, so I'd rather open this up for questions as quick as I can. But just to get an idea as to kind of what's on your minds, I figured we'd just do this real fast. What issues are on your minds? Like when you think about the challenges going across our community, our country today, what issues come up? Just shout them out, but make sure I can write them down. Nobody's concerned about anything, everything's great. Gun violence.
LGBTQ rights.
LGBTQ, what else?
Climate change.
Climate change? Immigration? Hold on. Healthcare?
Yeah, healthcare.
Omnibus? Congress? Marijuana. Easy now with the marijuana. Everybody giggled enough. I got marijuana. I heard something about class, socioeconomic class. Was that something? Socioeconomics? What'd you say? DACA.
I said something about the wall.
About the what? The wall. Okay, hold on. So, school safety? Illegal immigration? Something epidemic?
Assisted suicide.
Assisted suicide? Good one. Environmental issues? American what? Hold on, guys. American imperialism. I'm going to put foreign policy. How about that? American imperialism / foreign policy. Anybody else? Anything I'm missing? Prisoners' rights? Good one. What was it? Drug epidemic and then something else I heard. Racism. Okay. Here's our list. Ready? Guns, LGBTQ rights, climate change, environmental issues, immigration, illegal immigration, DACA, healthcare, omnibus, Congress, marijuana, socioeconomics, school safety, abortion, assisted suicide, American imperialism, foreign policy, prisoners' rights, racism, and drug epidemic. Okay. You guys get 3 votes each. All right? Don't let me count you or see you vote more than 3 times. I just want to get an idea as to which of these issues, and it's a very good list, which of them are kind of top of mind, all right? So I'm not going to count everybody. I'm just going to kind of give a rough show of hands and just curious as to what's top of your list. Ready? So I just read through the list. You guys remember it? All right, you want me to read through it again? Killing me. All right, ready? It's your list. Guns, LGBTQ rights, climate change, immigration, illegal immigration, DACA, we'll put that all in one bucket. Healthcare, omnibus, Congress, marijuana, socioeconomics, the wall, school safety, abortion, assisted suicide, environmental issues, American imperialism and foreign policy, prisoners' rights, racism, and the drug epidemic. Got it? Guns. Okay. LGBTQ rights. Climate change / environmental issues. Okay. Immigration / DACA. Okay. Healthcare. Omnibus. Good work, guys. Congress. No one cares about Congress. Okay. Thanks for the invitation. It's been a while. Marijuana. Stop snickering, everybody. All right. Socioeconomics. Okay. The wall. School safety. Abortion. Women's rights. Assisted suicide. American imperialism and / foreign policy. Prisoners' rights. Racism. Drug epidemic. All right. So, my rough list here, guns was pretty much at the top of the list. Marijuana was close. Immigration writ large was close. School safety, it's a good list. Thank you. You guys are clearly paying pretty darn close attention to what's going on, not only around your community and your school and your families, but around the country. These are the debates that Congress, to an extent, we are having, and to a larger extent, we should be having down in Washington. So I'm happy to get into those issues, the details on some of those issues as well, but let me give you a little bit of a frame of kind of what it is that I do, I guess. Any of you guys 18? Couple? Any of you ever voted before? 1? 2? Couple? Great, thanks. I hope all of you will be planning on voting in our primaries, that all of you that can vote will be voting in our primary coming up in September. And then in the general election, and obviously I say this regardless of to your political representation or your political affiliation in any sense, Democrat, Republican, other, it is so incredibly important that everyone, up and down the ticket from the president to your senators, to your members of the House of Representatives, to the state and local government, hear your voice. And the best way you can do that is to make sure you vote. So if there's one message you take away from this, it's It's for the you folks that can vote. Please, please, please do. So a little bit about me, just for background. I grew up right around Boston. My parents split up, so I was bouncing around between Brighton and Cambridge. Went to high school up there, went to college out in California, ended up working in New York for a little while at the UN, went off to the Peace Corps. Anybody heard of the Peace Corps? Sort of? Shout out back there, thanks. So I spent 2.5 years working in the Dominican Republic. I had intermittent electricity, intermittent running water, worked with a local group of guys who made about roughly $2,000 or so over the course of a year, and tried to find ways to help back their community, and was able to, I think. It was by far the most impactful professional experience I've had in my life, and certainly opened my eyes to some of the efforts that I wanted to do throughout the rest of my life. Came back from the Dominican Republic, ended up going off to law school, spent 3 years in law school, did some more legal aid work, did some more international development work. Best thing I did in law school was to meet my wife and marry her. So thank you, good work. Advice to you guys, if you can't figure out the answers to class, marry the girl that does. It was very helpful all the way through. Ended up working in our court system for a couple of years as a prosecutor, on first in Barnstable County, so the Cape and Islands, and then up in Middlesex County, the area basically right around Boston. And then I did most of the cases I was working on were a lot of assault and battery, so essentially fights, a lot of drugs, a lot of domestic violence. And a lot of those drug cases, somebody highlighted the drug epidemic. A lot of the cases that I was working on was at the beginning of the opiate epidemic. So prescription drugs that were coming up the eastern seaboard, at that point largely from Florida, and still being diverted from some of our pharmacies here. People that were getting hooked on pills, and the nature of that epidemic, because pills were so expensive, it was opening the door to heroin addiction. And in order to try to afford this addiction, folks not all that older than you guys, not all that younger than me, and some folks my age at the time, that were committing pretty bad crimes because they were sick. And the consequence of it was that we were locking people up who need help. And if you could actually address the underlying addiction, you'd make sure they weren't committing a crime, because the impetus for the crime was the fact that they were addicted. And it opened my eyes to the fact that we needed to treat drug addiction differently in this country. And the tools that we have at the moment, I don't think are sufficient. And the way that the system that we have in place to try to address that systemic change is the law. And the way you change law is politics. And the way you do that is you run for office. So I did. It hasn't exactly worked out the way I thought it would. It's been a tougher time down in Washington than even I thought. I will say a couple things. One, the vast majority of my colleagues, regardless of party, are pretty good folks. They are doing their best to represent their communities, their districts, just like I'm doing my best to represent you. It's a divided country, and that's fine. Our system is supposed to not only allow dissent, but celebrate it, and pull people together that think differently, that are from, if you drew the country up, as we do, to 435 different parts, get everybody in a room and tell them to figure it out. It's gonna be a messy process. That's fine. The problem at the moment is that some of the structural incentives we have about how that system works are make it harder than it should. That being said, it was never supposed to be easy. Our system is structured to actually make it difficult. It's not supposed to be this hard, though. And so, at the moment, I think you're seeing this pressure in our system from conservative Republicans that are angry that they've got unified control of government and still can't deliver on the promises that they wanted, how they believe government should run. You've got progressive Democrats that are angry and scared and frustrated at the direction that a Trump administration is bringing the country and are fighting back against it with all that they've got. And you've got folks in the middle that think everybody else is nuts and are stepping back and going, you guys, everybody's crazy. But regardless, if you're a Democrat, progressive Democrat, to a conservative Republican, to folks in the middle, everybody's kind of stepping back and saying, our system isn't working. And the consequence of that is that our system doesn't work. So there's a second message I want to kind of impart on all of you. It's the system, like everything else, you get out of it what you're willing to put into it. And if people pull back from that, you're not going to actually solve the problems that I think many of us want to solve, regardless as to your definition of success. Whatever you believe the right solution is for our immigration system, it's not going to get solved if citizens, if your government just sits there and goes, hey, it's not my problem to solve. Of course it's your problem to solve. It's our problem to solve. It's our system. So you got to roll up your sleeves and dive on in. With that, I'll stop. Happy to take some questions. Happy to just turn this over to a conversation. I guess there's some prepared questions, but I also would love to just take them from however you guys want to do it. But thanks for having me.
I'm Peter Lally. I'm a senior here. My question is, how has your family name affected your career choice, and do you think it's helped or hurt you in becoming a congressman?
Peter, thanks. Good question. So, everybody heard it? Yeah. So, without question, my family name has helped me, particularly in Massachusetts, no doubt. I get that question a fair amount. People are probably surprised. A lot of folks think that it's kind of our family business, and so you grow up as a member of my family, and you're going to go into politics. The person that pushed me hardest not to run for Congress was my dad. And my dad was actually a member of Congress for 12 years. So the job itself, I do believe, is an extraordinary honor. It is a privilege to be able to represent your views and your parents' views in Congress. Not to say I always do that the way you would like, but I do my best. And where we disagree, I try to think that my decisions are informed and that I do my best to represent you all and to give you a voice and to give you a chance to let me know if I'm not doing a good job. It's hard. It's a hard job. It's particularly a hard job for a young family. I've got a 2-year-old little girl and a 3-month-old little boy, and my wife lives back up here in Newton, and I spend half my time in Washington and a lot of time on an airplane. And my dad, who served in office for 12 years from the time I was about 7 years old up through my high school graduation, knew more than anybody how difficult it is to try to raise a family with it and the pressures that are put on you in public office. And that if I personally didn't really want to do it myself, then it's not worth it. And if you don't think it's worth it, if your family isn't bought into it, not only are you going to lose an election, but it's miserable. And so he pushed me pretty hard to make sure that this was something I wanted to do. And that advice has become even more clear to me as I've been in this job now for 5 years, because unless there is something that is driving you through the rigors of a campaign, the examination of press, the hard questions you get from your constituents, the demands that you have about being at least 2 places at once, unless there's something that's driving you through it, it isn't worth it. It's worth it for me at the moment, and I've got an incredible wife and a great family that's willing to support me in it and support to be the glue that holds it together, but it ain't easy. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Audrey Martin. I'm a senior here. I wanted to know what you're working on currently.
Audrey, thanks. So what am I working on currently? A couple of things. One of the areas that I've been most focused on since I've been in Congress has been healthcare, trying to make sure that we extend and expand on the idea that every person in this country gets access to quality, affordable, accessible healthcare. That is a line that is easy to say. It's actually awfully hard to do. One of the realities of our healthcare system, though, is that if you believe that if I, in walking back to my car, get hit by a bus walking across the street, if an ambulance is going to pick you up and take you to a hospital and treat you before they look for an insurance card, it means that we're actually not fighting about, and we're not in Congress, you're not fighting about the provision of care. What we have this disagreement about is how, when, and who pays for it. And unfortunately, those questions have gotten politically supercharged, where we're not actually having I think the debate that we need to have about it. There's more agreement on this than people might think, but some of this involves choices where some of my conservative colleagues disagree with some of the ideas that some of my progressive colleagues have. That's fine. Again, we should be able to work its way out. One of the areas that I've focused on underneath that healthcare umbrella has been actually mental and behavioral health and addiction. And the the bottom line on this is that our mental and behavioral health system in this country has been underfunded and overlooked now at every level, from the federal government to state government to local government, for decades, which is one of the reasons why I saw the consequence of it in our local court system, because a lot of times what would happen with somebody that's suffering from either mental behavioral illness or drug addiction or otherwise, they get arrested. And our de facto safety net for folks suffering from mental illness ends up being our jails. And yes, on the one hand, you could say they're there because they're committing a crime, sure, but if the crime is disturbing the peace or disorderly conduct, or even breaking into a home to try to get money to buy another OxyContin pill, what you've actually got is somebody that needs addiction treatment and long-term care, not somebody that is necessarily committing a crime because they have a malicious intent to hurt somebody else. And if that's the case, if I don't treat that person suffering from an opioid epidemic and I just lock them up for 2 months, they're going to come back out, they're still going to be addicted, they're going to do the exact same thing all over again. And so our underfunding of our mental health system ends up meaning that we have to pay far more for mitigation in our prison system. And I've been doing an awful lot of work to try to shift that around. There's a lot of other stuff, kind of smaller details. You guys probably, on the one hand, might be shocked to know, on the other hand, wouldn't. If you ever interact with a congressional office, there's a form you have to fill out that gives our office the legal authority to talk to whatever agency, that, whether it's taxes or veterans benefits or whatever else that you might have a problem with. You cannot do that at the moment online. You cannot do that on an app. There is no app for that. Legally, there cannot be. I've got a bill that was actually an idea of one of our Republican colleagues to make sure that there is an app for that. Not only is that a little bit more convenient, but it becomes particularly important if you are in, say, Puerto Rico or Texas, and your home's been flooded out, and mail isn't getting delivered, and you don't have a printer ribbon where you can print something out, or an ink cartridge, and mail it back into a congressional office to get authorization for it. If you can go to a disaster center and they actually can just sign something on an app with a signature that gives you the ability to actually then interface with the federal government, it makes it an awful lot easier to get some of the challenges, to get some of the answers that you need. So there's a lot of little pieces to this that end up not having, this is not a partisan fight. This is actually rolling through Congress pretty quickly. The technicalities on it are pretty hard, but there's plenty of ways, if you actually have relationships with folks on the other side, that you can get a bunch of bills done. So a couple of things we're working on at the moment. Thanks. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Allie Chase, and I'm a junior. My question for you is there anything about being a congressman that has surprised you?
Is there anything about being a congressman that surprised me? Yeah. Yeah. How long you got? So look, on the good side, the vast majority of my colleagues, I think, are well-intentioned and are trying to do what they think is right for their districts and the people they represent. And that's a good thing. That's what we should all want. There's differences between what is going to be the focus of, say, somebody in more or less greater Boston than from rural Idaho or Nebraska or Tennessee, right? There's regional differences to the country. We're clustered in urban setting. It's a high cost of living. There's a whole bunch of other challenges that you all see on a daily basis than some other parts of the country see. That's fine. So the nice surprise has been that the vast majority of my colleagues work pretty hard, are really well-intentioned, and are trying to do what they think is the right thing. We will disagree on some of those priorities. Fine. That's been the pleasant surprise. The not so pleasant surprise has been just how difficult it has become structurally to make our government function. You see a lot of promising individuals. There's an awful lot of people running for Congress now. There's going to be some pretty amazing campaigns all over the country with these challengers that have these incredible resumes that have done amazing things over the course of their lives, whether they're war heroes or created businesses or dedicated public servants. They're inspiring people to come support them as they run for office. That's great. It doesn't just happen then that these folks become inspiring leaders that then all of a sudden win an election and have a lobotomy and become idiot members of Congress, right? The system, I think largely due to two issues, campaign finance laws and redistricting, make it so that the system itself does not work nearly as well as it should. It is incentivizing people to, it is incentivizing partisanship rather than consensus and compromise. And the whole point of a legislative body is to work towards compromise. And compromise means there's got to be things there that I don't like. I'm going to have to give up on things that I don't want to give up on. It also means you don't have to win every vote, right? Congress should be able to pass things that I won't necessarily vote for. That's fine. There's some things that I would vote for that Congress should still be able to pass that some of my other colleagues wouldn't like. We are in a position at the moment where, unless, because of these structures, the type of leadership you're getting out of Congress ends up being far more extreme than the country actually is, and it's, I think, fueling this frustration and disenchantment with our Congress as an institution and our political process, which I don't think, in the long run, benefits anybody. And so that's been an unfortunate surprise.
My name's Nicole Brown. I'm a
Junior?
junior, yes. So I know you touched upon this a little bit, but I was just wondering how you personally go about like putting aside political differences to get something done.
How do I go about putting aside political differences to get something done? I do my best to convince all of my colleagues I'm right and that I don't have to, right? So short of that, look, it's a recognition that in the House of Representatives, I am one of 435 members. As long as I have been there, so 5.5 years or so, it has been under Republican control, which means even when I was there with President Obama, if I wanted to get a bill passed, if I believe that, and I do, that governments, at the best of times, our responsibility is to try to solve problems, right? The issues that we are dealt with, or that come to us, are when somebody sees a problem in front of us that says, hey, we gotta find a way to fix this, whether that's issues of Afghanistan, Iran, and Syria, whether that's issues in our financial services industry, whether that's issues on climate change, whether it's guns and school safety. People see a problem and they want government to try to solve it. I recognize that my solutions are going to need not only Republican support because I need to get Republican votes on it, but I need Republicans that will actually champion it to tell their leadership, hey, we want to move this bill. And I need it to thread a needle of getting enough conservative Republican support to want to move the bill, but also have enough of my Democratic colleagues that will sign on to the bill, and with President Obama, having it be something that he would also support. So you had to thread a bit of a narrow needle. That has changed a bit with Republican control throughout the House, the Senate, and the presidency. The shift on that, I would say, and this is, I'm not so sure everyone would agree with me, has been that the desire then, the reality for some of my colleagues, that Republican colleagues that understand, hey, we want to solve this problem too, and we know that Obama has to sign it, so we'll be willing to compromise on something because we need to get the bill passed from a president. There's less of that because they don't need a Democratic president to sign it anymore. So rather than having bills that would be more or less centrist, right, Republican House, the Democratic president, those bills shift more conservative because they say, we don't necessarily need you so much. Now, on the issues that I identified, they have been willing to work with me, and would it be exactly the way I would have solved the problem? Probably not on some of those bills, but some of them are technical enough and they're not partisan enough. No one's putting up a big philosophical debate about trying to make sure somebody in the midst of a disaster gets access to the resources of their federal government, right? Making government more efficient is something that everybody wants to do. So in that regard, everybody's happy to do it. But the reality is that the political realities have changed in Washington, and so the nature of which you go about your job changes a little bit too, just because the game's changed a bit, if that makes sense.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Setho Dayapin and I'm a junior. And my question,
Sorry, Sather?
yeah.
Great.
My question is, what is your advice for high school students interested in pursuing a career of government?
What is my advice for high school students interested in pursuing a career in government? How old are you?
16.
16. Okay, so you got to be 25 before you can run for Congress. If you're going to do that, please move out of this district would be the first piece of advice I would give you. Short of that. So look, I think government service at any level, whether that's school board, whether that's President of the United States, there are parts of any of those jobs that are going to be extremely rewarding. There are parts of every one of those jobs that is extremely difficult and frustrating. One of my closest friends in Congress worked very closely with President Bill Clinton, was in the Oval Office every day with him, and told me something that I've always remembered. He said, you know what, Bill Clinton woke up every day realizing that he was president of the United States and still felt like he couldn't get anything done, right? Our system is set up to make sure that no one has complete control over the levers of power. It is a hard, long grind. But while it is a grind, those gears do grind towards progress, undoubtedly. The views that we have seen evolve across our society, particularly when it comes to one of the issues that you all highlighted, LGBT rights, where the nature of the discussion we were having 15 years ago is nowhere close to the nature of the discussion we are having today, right? And that's not just a legislative result of legislation, that's a result of society just changing its views. But the legislation and our government's voice in that and role in that, I do believe is critical. So from my perspective, the most important thing that somebody who seeks to serve in government needs to have is a reason as to why you want to put yourself through it, right? These endless meetings, the grunt work that you have to go through, the campaign events, the raising of money, the answers to questions, the scrutiny, the fact that you don't really have a private life anymore, that you might think you have a beautiful Saturday and Sunday for the first time in 6 months because New England weather happened, and you gotta work all day Sunday. And I gotta get on a plane on the next day and be away from my family. Something that drives you through that to say, this is still worth it. I have no doubt that all of you are under extraordinary pressure to find the right internship or job or extracurricular activity to then get what you need to do to apply for college, which I am so glad I don't have to apply for college anymore. I cannot imagine what you all are going through in that process. It looks miserable. And the pressure that you will be under after that to get a good experience on your resume, to get a good job, and the pressure that everybody's gonna be under that. But in the long run, I will tell you this, no one asks me anymore where I went to college. No one really even asked me where I went to law school. No one asked me the grades I got in high school. No one asked me what sports I played. The part that gets me through the hard times the challenging times of this job at the moment, are informed largely by the experiences I've had working in the court system, experience as a legal aid volunteer, and my experiences as a Peace Corps volunteer in the Dominican Republic. And experiences that I've had as part of this job where I do believe, as hard and as dysfunctional as our system might be at the moment, the way you address the structures of the most powerful country in the world is through our political process. And I believe those structures need to be adjusted. But that means you need to change them, and that means you need to grind it out. But the bullet point on the resume that might have looked best at the time wouldn't have necessarily given me that experience. And so, to the greatest extent possible, and this will probably fall on, you'll probably dismiss it because it's a hard thing to be able to do at the moment, and I get that, but is to make sure that there's an experience out there that you all have that ignites some sort of passion in you, whether it's government service or anything else for that matter, that lets you say, this is what I want to do, or, and being very candid here, I've had interns in our office, many of whom say it's been a great experience and they learned so much and all the rest of it, what you would expect people would say to a congressman sitting down after they gave them an internship. And I had one woman, a college student, turn to me and go, this made me realize I never want to work in government ever again in my life. It means it was a valuable experience. That for her, this was something that she thought she might want to do, but then for whatever reason, it was just not. But make sure you've got that right experience, something that guides you in that direction, because otherwise, what you don't want to do is think that you want to do it, get in the middle of it, and then realize it was a terrible mistake, which it might be. And don't forget to move before you run against me.
Hello, my name is Lily Walsh. I'm a senior here. My question is, what is the most gratifying part of your job?
What is the most gratifying part of my job? So, the best part of my job is when you have a moment where you realize that you are able to leverage the powers of our government to help people. And sometimes that's on an individual basis. I've got members of my staff here that do an awful lot of my job as constituent casework, where you, your family members, your friends, constituents have a problem with the IRS, with our Veterans Affairs Department, with Medicare, Medicaid, people that are in really desperate need of help, and we are able to help them. And you help them in a really big way. And that's, on the one hand, an average day for folks in my office. On the other hand, it means literally everything to the folks that are helped. And every now and again, I'll hear some of those stories. I'll get letters from our constituents that will tell me about how desperate they were and how there was somebody on my staff that was able to help them, and how much it meant to them. And how, more than anything, it also meant that the most powerful government in the world had representatives there that were willing to listen and help a constituent that happened to knock on our door or send an email or make a phone call. And that's a pretty powerful thing for me. The other part is, so that's on an individual basis. The other part is structurally, when you are able to pass a law that you know, or fund a program that you know will help people. One of the areas that I've been really focused on, because I was a legal aid volunteer when I was in law school, has been trying to make sure that everybody gets access to a lawyer when you need one. And across the country, millions and millions of people don't. And that's a problem. I read a letter today from a constituent who said that her home was foreclosed on because the bank made an error. But they've now been in a legal fight for years trying to get the paperwork corrected. And that's just, the bank error is part of a machine, and they just keep cranking on through as if this family didn't pay their mortgage and has almost lost their house, or been in a position of almost losing their home now for years. Get access to a lawyer, that process is an awful lot easier than if you're trying to navigate it on your own. We were able to, I started a little group called a caucus in Washington with a Republican colleague to try to make the case to our conservative colleagues, largely, that the Legal Services Corporation, which is the grant-making entity that from the federal government that sends money out to local communities on this, was a viable and important thing to do, because it almost always gets cut out and zeroed out in Republican budgets. We increased that funding, I think, to a record high this year. We had more Republicans sign on in support of the organization than they've ever had. There are literally millions of other people this year that will get access to an attorney because of those efforts. Is that wholly mine? No. But there's an awful lot of people that will have no idea that they are getting helped by that funding that will. Those are going to be families put together, there are going to be homes that they can still stay in, there's going to be parts of the law that we have written to try to protect them, it's consumers' rights, that they otherwise wouldn't have gotten access to. And when you're able to do things like that, that helps. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Kennedy, what's up?
What's going on?
So my question is, which Congress people are your best friends?
Who's my best friend in Congress? Oh, good. I got a couple of them. So best friends on the Democratic side of the aisle. One of them is this guy, Beto O'Rourke, who's running for Senate in Texas. Pretty cool guy. Used to be a member of a punk rock band. Another one is Tulsi Gabbard, who represents Hawaii. Yep. Another is guy Eric Swalwell, who's, all of these folks are younger. Eric Swalwell, who's basically my age, was a prosecutor out in California, represents the Bay Area. One of my best friends on the Republican side is this guy, Mark Wayne Mullen, who represents Oklahoma. He's a former cage fighter. Swear to God. So he's about yay tall. He's in great shape. And he was like a wrestling champion that decided that it was like a good idea to get inside some metal cage and fight people. And then ran for Congress and won. So I guess if you're asking for political advice about what to do for government, you could become a cage fighter, right? That might be one way to do it. Worked for him. He's one of those folks, he and I philosophically don't agree on much, but he's a really good guy. And so I work out with him in the mornings, and he kicks the tar out of me, literally. I don't fight him because he'd kick my butt. And then this guy, Jason Smith, who's a Republican from Missouri, one of the most conservative districts in the country. Donald Trump's favorability rating in that district is over 80%. And he's a very good friend of mine. He and I will almost never vote the same way on any bill. He's a huge Taylor Swift fan, which for like a 40-year-old guy is a little embarrassing, but you know. There's a bunch of really good people there that I count as friends, right? The same way you guys probably have friends that come down differently on issues or differently on politics, and no one really thinks about it. I do too. It just happens to be a bigger part of my job.
Cool.
Yeah.
My name is Michael Dacey, and I'm a freshman. My question is, what legislation do you hope to see passed by the end of the year?
Michael, what legislation do I hope to see passed by the end of the year? So, I hope to see a lot. I'm not necessarily optimistic on a ton of it. The one thing I hope we do, if there's one thing that I would say, look, there's a lot of things we need to do. I don't think we'll do many of them. If there's one that I think there's a small chance that has just recently got some life breathed back into it, it's around DACA. So one of the frustrating aspects of this has been for aspects of our immigration, various issues on immigration in our country. We actually have the votes to pass a bill to solve that problem. We've had the votes to solve the DACA issue for literally, in my mind, years. And we've certainly had it throughout the course of this Congress. We've got enough Republicans that, if they teamed with Democrats, could pass a bill that preserves DACA and pass the DREAM Act. What has been challenging about it is a political process by which Republican leadership will allow those Republican members, 30 or 40 of them, to vote with us on a bill because Republicans control the way that a bill gets to the floor for a vote. And unless Republican leadership says okay, or one other big thing happens, we can't get a bill voted on. There is one Republican that supposedly, and he's just gone public with this over the course of the past couple days, has been willing to pull together enough Republicans to allow a process to go forward that could put a series of bills on the floor, and whichever bill gets the most votes would come up ultimately then for a vote to pass. If that's the case, I'm pretty confident we could pass our DACA fix. The question then comes, will the Senate do it, and what will the president do? But that's much further than we've been on this in a year. And I would hope that we would still at least get a chance to do that. That's not in our hands at the moment, that's in theirs, but if we can at least solve that problem. I've met with a number of DACA-eligible young men and women in this country that tell a similar story, right? They've been here since they were 2 years old, and they're not sure what they're gonna be able to do anymore. Some of them have families, some of them are terrified that they could be shipped off to a country that they've never been in and a language that they don't even speak. Because their Congress can't figure out a way to deal with it, even though we have the votes to solve it, which is pretty amazing. So hopefully we'll at least cross that one.
Thank you.
Congressman Kennedy, thank you so much. That was awesome. Big round of applause. I want to thank you for just your inspiring words, giving us a little behind-the-scenes glimpse of how things work in Congress and in Washington, and just for sharing about what you're passionate about. And again, thank you so much for your polite attention. Excellent questions. You may head quietly back to class. Thank you.